Welcome to the Chicago League of Women Voters Zooming with the Alderman series of interviews. My name is Judy Schindler. Founded 101 years ago, right here in Chicago, the League is a nonpartisan political organization which encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government. It works to increase the understanding of major public policy issues, and 3, influences public policy through education and advocacy. The Chicago League is one of hundreds of local leagues all across the country. These interviews with the aldermen are part of our efforts to educate Chicagoans about those who represent us in setting the policies and ordinances that govern us here in Chicago. Today, our guest is Alderman Chris Taliaferro of the 29th Ward. Welcome, Alderman Taliaferro.
Thank you, Ms. Snyder. It's good to be here with you this morning.
Please know that the Zoom session is being recorded and will be available for viewing after today on the League website. We'll be sending you and everyone who registered for this program and is not a member a link to the video when it becomes available. Also, everyone should know that we provided the alderman a copy of the questions I'll be asking ahead of time. Before we starting on those questions, we'd like to show you a map of all 50 wards in the state. Now the cursor will show us where the 29th Ward is. As you can see, it's on the far west side, but covers a great deal of territory from Roosevelt up as far as Roscoe, I believe, right?
That's correct.
And okay, so if you could describe your ward for us a little bit more than I have, and the main boundaries and what neighborhoods it includes.
It's a very oddly shaped map. In fact, during my time in office, I've had a lot of comment about how the map was geographically drawn, not with regard to race or anything like that, but just the odd shape of it. We are a far west side ward, and we stretch into the northwest portion of the city as well. We abut Cicero to the very south of the ward. Roosevelt would be in our south boundary. And then to the west of our ward, the far west, we have Oak Park. And then to our farthest west, we abut with Elmwood Park. So we're as far west as you can go before you hit the suburbs. Those are our western boundaries. Our eastern boundaries are Sayre, as you're in the northwest portion of our ward. And as you go to the central portion of our ward, you will see Central. And then to the far east of our ward, at the southern portion of the ward, we're west-eastern boundary is Cicero Avenue.
So that's a good part of the city.
It is.
And as it is so diverse, what are the key issues facing the people of your ward?
I would say, our key issue, and probably perhaps our most important issue, are 2. One being public safety, with the increase in violence over the last 2 years. When we look back to 2015, when I became an alderman, we were looking at 34 to 35, averaging 34 to 35 murders a year, with an increased number of shootings as well. As time progressed, we were able to get those numbers down significantly to averaging no more than 7 to 10 murders a year. Over the last 2 years, those numbers have increased for various reasons, but those numbers have increased back up to 30 to 35 murders on average over those last 2 years. So I would say one of our most important areas of interest in that are issues within our neighborhood and communities would have to be public safety and violence. But I also want to stress the importance that not just this particular ward, but the entire city when it comes to public safety and this other issue, and that's the issue of the pandemic, COVID-19 virus. I don't think we should forget that. We are in a majority minority community where there's a lot of skepticism and there's a lot of false information, and there's not a lot of The majority of the folks are not vaccinated as a result of false information. And so I think that has to continue to be one of our main concerns and issues within the city, but more so within our wards as well.
I think you just said that you joined city council in 2015. Was that correct?
I did, yes.
And why did you decide to run? I know that you're an attorney and had been a police officer. Why did you decide to run at that time?
Well, I think the predominant reason for my running for Alderman, and there's a variety of them. I worked on the area as a police officer in the 25th district, as well as the 15th district on occasion. And I just saw a need for strong leadership with some of the issues that were pressing. As I said before, we did have a lot of murders. And I felt that with my experience, I've spent my entire life since I was 17 years old in public service, serving in the National Guards when I was a junior in high school, and then joining the Marine Corps when I was 18.
Wow.
And after serving 10 years in the military, I served as a Chicago police officer for the next 22 years or 23 years. And so I think it was. Yes.
Sorry, when did you go to law school?
I went to law school. Well, actually, because I went to join the military right out of high school, I did my undergrad and law school during my time on the Chicago Police Department.
Ah.
Yeah, and so I think it was my experiences as a Chicago police officer, seeing what the community was faced with, and we had rising violence back then as well. So the first thing I did as Alderman is started implementing some of the things that I thought would be effective in reducing violence, and we did see a sharp increase in reduction of violence.
Do you currently have any other employment?
I am an attorney, and I do limited practicing. I feel that it was important for me to maintain, because I am a young attorney, although I won't say young in age. I'm a young attorney with regard to the number of years I've been practicing. So I do maintain a minimal schedule that will keep me in abreast with current laws in the field that I practice in.
Tell us about your committee assignments. And do you chair any, or are you chair or vice chair of any of your committees?
I am not a vice chair, but I am, as we are all on the Rules Committee. I serve on the License and Consumer Protection Committee, Workforce Development, Special Event, Cultural Affairs and Recreation. I am on Finance and Budget and Government Operations, and I chair the Committee on Public Safety. Perhaps it's my argument that it's probably one of the busiest committees outside of probably Budget and Finance. It is a very busy committee over the last several years.
That's quite a load. What, if any, changes would you like to see made in the operations of the council?
Well, I have championed for one major change. For the last 2 years, I've wanted, even before this administration, I've wanted to see our city council be streamlined when it comes down to the introduction of ordinances and resolutions. I wanted us to use, and I would like to see us use, a more digital format. Right now, as it stands, and if you're familiar with how city council operates, many of our ordinances and resolutions are introduced on the day of council. Now with COVID, we've gone to much more of a remote means with electronically doing it, but there's still caucusing on the floor, which can cause a disruption of the procedures of city council. So what I would like to see our city council move toward is a digital format where aldermen can actually go in and sign on to an ordinance or resolution should they choose electronically. That would cut down the caucusing, that would give us an opportunity to read ordinances or resolutions before we sign on to them. I think that's important, Judy, for another particular reason. Oftentimes we are given 6 or 7 pages to read and to look at. And during the process of trying to listen to what's going on in city council and looking at that ordinance, you get a synopsis from the chief sponsor. So you don't read and you sign on to it. as a co-sponsor. And then you find out a little later, well, there's some things in here that I don't necessarily support. So you have to take the time and effort to go in and take your name off as a co-sponsor. Should we go to a digital format or an electronic format, we would have an opportunity to read that entire ordinance prior to signing our names onto it. And then I think it would give us a more informed, given us a better opportunity for a more informed decision. So that would probably be my most, I think, one that's we should change relatively soon.
I see. Now, you talked about gun violence. What actions by the city could be taken to reduce gun violence? And what's been done so far that you think might be effective or will be effective?
Well, I am a strong proponent in my belief that our police can't solve it all, and they are there for a law enforcement perspective. They are there to protect and serve our residents of the city, but they are not the only answer to reducing gun violence, because there are so many facets as to why there is so much gun violence. And so I think what the city has done and what we need to continue to do is to really make sure that resources are available in communities that are underserved. I think when I look at the mayor's most recent budget, when it comes down to mental illness and mental health, to increase that by $6 million and to add 29 new positions, I think is a step in the right direction, along with providing opportunities for funding for violence outreach organizations. We have some wonderful outreach organizations with Metropolitan Family Services and their umbrella organizations, of which I believe are about 14 of them, that are doing some very good work in our communities. But it's those smaller organizations that are out here on the street that are doing the work that are not being resourced or funded. I know of at least two or three in my ward that are not in a position to receive the amount of funding that may be offered, but can take along smaller grants or smaller amounts to continue the work that they're doing. And so I think,
what kind of work do they do?
They're on the corners, every Wednesday in the summer, throughout the entirety of the summer. They're on the blocks, they're praying over the community, they're watching over the community. It's almost as if it's a neighborhood watch program. I think our block clubs need to be better funded or receive funding. These are the organizations that are on a street level that can make a difference in our community. So I'm happy to see that the mayor has taken those, and this administration has taken those issues into consideration. And we have to continue to provide opportunities or job opportunities. I'm very happy to say that on the west side of Chicago, not just in the 29th Ward, the Invest Southwest program has been very successful. When that program is successful and provide business opportunities or economic opportunities, then we can hire young men and young women that live in our neighborhoods so that they can be gainfully employed. Because the goal is to get them off the street. Many of them find that, okay, I've dropped out in the 10th grade. I don't have an opportunity. I don't have a high school diploma. No one's going to hire me. I have to provide for my family. So let me commit this one illegal act or two or three, and it just continues to provide for their families. But if they have the opportunities through economic resources and through jobs, then we can help to reduce gun violence.
Oh, thank you. That's very good information. Those are long-term. And do you see any other short-term?
Well, there are also short-term investments as well. For example, through the Invest Southwest and the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund grants, just in the 29th Ward alone, we've been able to open several businesses. They're already up and running, and they've already been hiring from the community. Those grants have funded programs in the 29th Ward, and they've funded businesses in the 29th Ward that were able to already hire people. And so although they are long-term, they do have a short-term impact as well.
Oh, that's very interesting. Let me go back a minute. You were talking before about electronically introducing proposed legislation or ordinances. The League of Women Voters have noticed regularly that items get passed where the public hasn't had a chance to look at those proposed ordinances. Would your proposal of having everything electronic make that more accessible to the public? And would you support that making those items available to the public to say no later than 2 business days prior to a meeting?
It would certainly be more accessible to the public, and one of the things that I am a strong proponent of as well is the public engagement, not just with resolutions and ordinances, but with the process of city council as well, like being able to speak publicly. I was strongly in favor of that before the council actually went to public speaking. But I think when it comes down to resolutions and ordinances, I don't think 48 hours is enough time, to be honest with you. I think the public should be able to see a proposed ordinance or resolution or order much sooner than 48 hours. And I say this because it takes a while to absorb some of the items that are being introduced into council. But 48 hours is the minimum. Usually when there's a direct introduction, council members cannot directly introduce an item into committee unless it's a routine matter. And a routine matter is one like traffic signs, stop signs,
Parking,
restricted parking. Those are routine matters that could be directly introduced. We are not, and I say generally because I've never seen it happen, but it may have. We're not authorized to directly introduce legislation into committee. However, the mayor is. The mayor is the only one that can directly introduce legislation into a committee. But if an item sits in committee for a while, the sponsors of that can call that item pursuant to Rule 41, which allows a 48 hours notice to the public and to their colleagues. At that time, it's placed on the clerk's website, but many people don't even know that these items that are up for vote and that are up for consideration and debate are available on the clerk's website the minute that they are filed, or the minute that it is being introduced pursuant to Rule 41. So 48 hours is the minimum, but it doesn't allow for time for public engagement, because if it's introduced pursuant to Rule 41, the only time that the public will have an opportunity to engage with council members on it is at the council meeting, and that's prior to the automatic discussion of it. So I would like to see that rule to be extended beyond 48, maybe 72 hours, and to better engage the public with regard to what's being introduced.
Well, I think the league will be happy to know that, and you'll find that we could be a strong ally on that topic.
Okay.
Let's go to another topic that the league is very interested in, which is ranked choice voting. Currently, when one candidate for mayor or alderman does not receive at least 50% plus one vote in the February election, the top 2 vote getters are on the ballot in a runoff election in April. What's your view about using ranked choice voting in February to determine the winner instead of a runoff?
Well, I think February may be too soon to introduce ranked choice voting. And I say that because I don't think our general public understands or ranked choice voting. And I say that because although I understand the concept of it, I have a lot of questions with regard to ranked choice voting. And I think for me, I want to understand not just the cost saving measures that it may produce, but I also want to understand the impact that it would have on incumbency, the impact it would have on a more underrepresented group, and that's women voters. I'm sorry, women elected officials. So there's a whole lot that I think I would rather, although I know the concept of it, I would like to know the impact of it before I could support it. But I think the most important facet of any voting system is that the public has an opportunity to vote, and that their vote is not being in any way diminished. So I could support ranked choice voting if I had a better understanding of it and were able to ask the important questions of how it would be more effective than the runoff system of voting. Now, I think, and I'll be very quick with it. I know sometimes as an attorney, I get a chance, I talk too much. But I think I would like to see the impact that it also has when you have multiple candidates, meaning a large number. When I ran in 2015, I think there were 8 or 9 candidates on the ballot itself, if I remember correctly. But there were 14 that started out. And so when you have ranked choice voting and you have 14 candidates for an open seat, or 14 candidates that are, 13 that are facing the incumbent, I want to see the impact of ranked choice voting and how it fares out. Some folks would just put 2 or 3 and they're done because it's hard to, okay, what was my 15th choice? What was my 13th choice? So it could be confusing to the voter. And so I think when I understand these principles a little bit more, I'd be able to make an informed decision as to, yes, I think this is better than the runoff system.
Thank you. And my final question is, if the league wanted to support one of your initiatives, what step would you recommend us to take? For example, asking us to call or write our alderman comments?
I think it would be important first to perhaps contact me so that we could sit down and talk about the best approach. But it would also, after that has been done, I think public engagement becomes very important. One of the reasons why we see an effective campaign with an ordinance or resolution is because the community has gotten behind it. The city or the residents have gotten behind it. And before that happens, there has to be, I think, the formulation, just like we do when it comes to election, we come up with a strategy. We come up with a campaign strategy to be effective. And I think that has to happen when there's an ordinance that needs to be pushed forward. There needs to be a strong strategy. So after a meeting, I think in discussing that strategy, then I think it will be important for outreach to occur. And I think the league could play a very important role. You guys have a whole lot of numbers out there. And I think, your good work over the last, I think you said 100 years, makes you have a strong voice out in the community. So I think public engagement would be probably the most important way of having to see a ordinance or resolution become heard and become a law in the city.
And are there some really important things you'd like to get done in this next year? Is this your last term? Is this
I don't know. Things are in the air because I am running for judge in this campaign cycle, this current election cycle. If I'm successful as a judicial candidate, yes, this will be my last term. If I'm not successful, I do intend on running for alderman, but I don't want to go past do more than 3 terms.
Well, thank you so much.
I think one of the issues that I think is pressing and that has been on my mind, and I think it's because of my background, I'm very concerned about our police department. From a mental illness standpoint, but also the direction that our police department is going. We are having a very difficult time recruiting. And so our numbers are somewhat dwindling. And I think they're being diminished to a point where I think it should cause some some concerns for elected officials and those that are leading the city. We have to find a better way to recruit police officers, but also be concerned with their mental health and mental illness. I'm trying to steal a page book from Los Angeles, who went down, averaging no more than one police suicide a year. In fact, Los Angeles went over 18-month period with no police suicides. But in Chicago, we have one of the highest suicide rates amongst our first responders in the nation.
Oh, that's something I don't think everybody knows.
Yeah, and I'm very happy to say that, you know, with this 2022's budget, there are more clinicians in the police district than were before. There's going to be a clinician in every area, and so I'm very happy that the mayor brought forward that, because the superintendent as well as the mayor is concerned about the mental health and mental illness of police officers is just as high as mine. So I like to see that push, because if we have a healthy officer, we could have a healthy department, and that will affect our city overall.
A really
But we
important point.
recently had a suicide, and you know, I think it's important that we need and not forget their families as well, because they are put in a financial strain all of a sudden. And so I'm trying to work with some of our supporters of this legislation to provide benefits for those officers that have taken their lives, and so that the families could be taken care of.
Alderman Taliaferro, thank you so much for being with us today. You brought up so many new points that we haven't heard about that much. So
Thank you,
really
Judy.
appreciate it.
Thank you. And I apologize, because I realized after I said it, I mispronounced your last name as we opened up.
Right.
I think I might have said Schneider or.
Yes, it's Schindler, but you won't be the first to have mispronounced it. Trust me.
But thank
As
you
a
so much for
reminder to
having me.
everybody who's watching, a link to this program will be found on the Chicago League's website, and everyone who's registered for today's program who's not a league member will receive an email with the link along with an invitation to join the league and to sign up for future programs. Next week, on Thursday, the 21st of January, I had it here, but I don't have it right now. It's Alderman Raboya from the 30th Ward. It will be at 6 p.m. and we hope you register for us. You'll be provided with the, so thank you again.
Thank you.
And thank you to all.
Thank you, Judy.